A young kitchen woman was accused of poisoning 12 dinner guests. On the same day, she was forced to marry the master's son. In a world where one bad ingredient could mean the noose, Naomi had questioned that damp sugar butt was overruled. Now, as bodies pile up and rage demands blood, she sits in a cell, waiting for a justice that was never meant to protect her. Her new husband, a man who claimed to love her, stays silent, while his father builds the case for her execution. But when a traveling doctor starts asking the wrong questions, he uncovers a truth more dangerous than poison. The master's own greed killed his guests. Now, with reputations crumbling and fortunes collapsing, one question remains: will the truth set her free? Or will she hang for a white man's crime? The first glow of morning slipped through the kitchen shutters like a whispered prayer. Naomi stood at the long oak table, her hands dusted white with flour, moving in the rhythm she'd learned from the elder women who'd raised her after her mama passed. The fire crackled low in the hearth. Bread dough sat rising under damp cloth, patient as Sunday. She was 17, slight-built but steady in her movements. Her head wrap was tied neat, her apron spotless, despite the early hour. The kitchen was her domain, the one place where her hands could create something good, something that fed people and brought a moment of pleasure to hard lives. "You've got a gentle touch, child," old Ruth would say, watching from her stool by the door. "Gentle heart, too. You guard that." Naomi had learned to guard everything: her words, her eyes, the small flame of faith that kept her standing when the weight of this life pressed heavy. She hummed low as she worked, an old hymn her mama used to sing. "His eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." The head cookie, Miss Beatrice, came through carrying a basket of eggs. She was a broad woman with silver threading through her hair, stern but fair. She paused, listening to Naomi's humming, and gave a single nod. "That's right," Miss Beatrice said. "Keep the Lord close. Ain't nothing else gonna keep you whole in this place." Naomi nodded without looking up. She measured flour by feel, the way she'd been taught 3 handfuls for every 2 of cornmeal. Her movements were sure. The kitchen smelled of wood smoke and rising bread, of coffee brewing and ham hanging in the smokehouse outside. The plantation stretched beyond these walls like a world unto itself. 300 acres of cotton and tobacco, a manor house of white-painted wood and tall columns, cabins in rouse fields that ran to the tree line. Master Haro owned it, all the land, the crop, the people who worked it. Naomi had been born here. She knew no other place. The morning passed in the usual way. Bread came out, golden. Breakfast for the big house went up on trays, grits and eggs, biscuits and preserves, coffee in the silver pot. Naomi worked alongside 2 other kitchen women, moving in practiced silence. Words weren't needed. They all knew their tasks. By mid-morning, she was kneading dough for the midday meal when she heard boots on the back stairs. She didn't look up. Didn't need to. She knew the sound of Jonathan Harrow's walk, measured, unhurried, different from his father's heavy tread or the overseer's sharp steps. "Morning," he said, his voice quiet. "Morning," Sir Naomi replied, keeping her eyes on the dough. Jonathan was the master's only son, 22 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead. He had his mother's gentle eyes, folks said, though Naomi had never known the first Mrs. Harrow. She died when Jonathan was small. "Came to fix that loose board Miss Beatrice mentioned," he said, setting down a toolbox. Miss Beatrice looked up from the stove, near the pantry door. "Been wobbling for a week." Jonathan nodded and moved to the spot. He knelt, examining the floorboard with careful attention. Naomi continued kneading, but she was aware of him there, aware of the way he moved, respectful, almost apologetic for taking up space in the kitchen. He'd been different since coming back from university 2 years prior. Quieter. He attended prayer meetings in town, carried a worn Bible in his coat pocket. Sometimes Naomi would see him reading in the garden, lips moving over scripture. She didn't trust it, couldn't afford to. Master's son was still Master's son, no matter how many verses he knew. But Jonathan had never been cruel, never raised his voice or his hand. He spoke to the kitchen women like they were people, not property. And that, Naomi knew, was dangerous in its own way. It made you hope for things that couldn't be. "There," Jonathan said after a few minutes. He stood, testing the board with his foot. "Should hold now. Much obliged," Miss Beatrice said. Jonathan gathered his tools. He paused at the door, and Naomi felt his eyes on her. She kept kneading, rhythm steady, refusing to meet his gaze. "I found something," he said quietly. "Prayer book you left in the chapel. I'll leave it on the side table for you." Naomi's hand stilled. She'd been looking for that book, a small volume with hymns and verses that one of the elder women had given her years ago. She must have left it after Sunday service. "Thank you, sir," she managed. When she finally looked up, Jonathan was gone, but the toolbox remained, sitting by the door as if he'd forgotten it, or left it on purpose, giving himself reason to return. Miss Beatrice came to stand beside Naomi. She didn't say anything, just looked at the doorway where Jonathan had stood, then back at Naomi. "Guard your heart, child," she said, so soft only Naomi could hear. "Got it close?" Naomi nodded. She shaped the dough into loaves and set 'em to rise. Outside, she could hear the plantation come into life wagon wheels on gravel, voices calling, the distant sound of work beginning in the fields. She returned to her humming, hands moving in the old patterns, trying not to think about the way Jonathan had held the prayer book like it mattered, like she mattered. Some things, old Ruth used to say, were more dangerous than cruelty. Kindness from the wrong person could undo you faster than any whip. Afternoon settled warm over the manor. In his father's study, Jonathan stood before the massive oak desk, his hands clasped behind his back. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and old leather. Ledgers lined the shelves. A portrait of his grandfather hung over the mantel. Master William Harrow sat in his chair, reviewing accounts. He was a large man, prosperous-looking, with silver at his temples and the confident bearing of someone who'd never been told no. He looked up when Jonathan cleared his throat. "Father, I need to speak with you." Master Harrow set down his pen. "Go on." Jonathan had rehearsed this. He'd prayed over it for weeks. But now, standing here, the words felt impossible. "I wish to marry," he said. His father's eyebrows rose. "That's fine news. Who's the girl?" "Someone from town. The Taylor family has a daughter, Naomi," Jonathan said. From the kitchen, the silence stretched long and tight. Master Harrow leaned back in his chair. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, calculation replacing surprise. "You can't be serious." "I am, sir. I've prayed on it. I believe you believe." His father's voice remained calm, which was somehow worse than anger. "Son, you can believe whatever fool thing you like, but belief doesn't change the law. You can't marry property, then free her. Give me my inheritance early. I'll build a life somewhere else." "Absolutely not." Master Harrow stood. He walked to the window, hands behind his back. "But I'm not going to rage at you like some men would. You're young. Young men make mistakes." Jonathan felt something cold settle in his chest. "It's not a mistake. I love her." Love. His father turned, and now there was something almost pitying in his look. "Jonathan, I'm going to teach you something about love. It's a fine sentiment, but it doesn't outrun law or property or the way this world works. The scriptures say a lot of things, and I've read them too." Master Harrow moved back to his desk. He pulled out a sheet of paper, dipped his pen. "Here's what we're going to do. We'll make this tidy. Legal, a marriage in private, ceremony and all. But Naomi remains my property. Her labor, her time, her future children all remain under my control. You'll live here, manage the western fields like we discussed. This way, nobody loses face. Nobody breaks the law." Jonathan stared at the paper his father was writing on. "That's not a marriage. That's reality." "Son?" His father didn't look up. "You want her under your roof? This is the only way it happens. Otherwise, she stays in the quarters, and you forget this notion entirely. Your choice." The pen scratched across paper. Jonathan's mind raced. He told himself this could work. That once they were married, he could gradually improve her circumstances, could eventually convince his father to grant freedom. Love would find a way. Faith would provide. He was 22 years old. He believed in mercy and redemption. He believed that doing something something compromised was better than doing nothing. And if I refuse, Jonathan asked. Master Harrow looked up. "Then I sell her." "Tomorrow?" "To a plantation in Louisiana where they need field hands, and you never see her again." The room seemed to tilt. "That's not. You wouldn't try me." His father's voice was flat. "I will not have scandal touch this family. You want to play house with the girl? Fine. We'll make it legal enough to prevent talk. But it happens my way, under my terms, or it doesn't happen at all." Jonathan closed his eyes. He thought of Naomi in the kitchen, humming hymns, her hands gentle on the dough. He thought of her in Louisiana, worked to death in the cane fields, and knew his father was not bluffing. "All right," he whispered. "Good." Master Harrow pulled another sheet of paper. "We'll have the ceremony tomorrow morning. Private. Pastor Wells from town, he'll do it quietly for the right contribution to his church. Naomi will continue her kitchen duties. You'll manage the western tract. Nobody outside this household needs to know the details." "Can I speak to her first?" "No. You'll speak to her as her husband tomorrow. Tonight, you'll stay in the manor, and she'll stay in her quarters. I'll inform Miss Beatrice of the arrangements." Jonathan wanted to argue, to protest, to do anything but stand there accepting these terms. But he could see no other path. His father had built a cage of choices, where every option led to captivity. The only question was how much freedom could be preserved within it. "Very well," he said. His father nodded, already turning back to his ledgers. "Go clean yourself up for supper. And Jonathan, this is the last time we'll discuss the romance of it all. From tomorrow on, this is simply a business arrangement. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Jonathan left the study. His legs felt unsteady. In his mind, he built explanations, told himself he was saving Naomi. That marriage, even under these terms, was better than the alternative. That God would honor his intentions, even if the means were compromised. But underneath, in a place he didn't want to look, he knew the truth. He was choosing his comfort over her freedom. He was choosing to keep her close rather than let her go. He was calling it love, but it was something else entirely. That night, Master Harrow sat at his desk until the lamp burned low. The marriage documents lay before him, written in his careful hand. The terms were simple. Jonathan Harrow would marry Naomi. Surname unknown. On the morning of June 5th, 10th, the ceremony would be conducted by Pastor Wells. Naomi would remain the legal property of William Harrow. Her labor would continue in the kitchen. Any children born of the union would likewise be property of William Harrow. Jonathan would receive a salary for managing the western fields. He and Naomi would occupy the overseer's cottage, which had been vacant since the previous man left for Texas. It was, Master Harrow thought, an elegant solution. It prevented scandal, kept a good cook in the kitchen, and tied Jonathan more firmly to the plantation. The boy's romantic notions would fade. They always did. Give him a year of reality, and he'd be grateful for the arrangement rather than resentful of its limitations. Master Harrow signed his name with a flourish. He, heated wax, pressed his seal. The documents were official now, waiting only for the signatures of Jonathan and Pastor Wells. He sat back, pleased with himself. Some men would have raged, would have had the girl whipped or sold out of spite. But William Harrow was a practical man. He bent when bending served his interests. He accommodated when accommodation kept peace. The plantation ran smoothly because he understood that absolute control was less effective than the illusion of choice. Let Jonathan think he'd won something. Let the girl think she'd been elevated. Neither would realize until too late that the cage had simply been made prettier. Master Harrow extinguished the lamp. Tomorrow would be simple. A quiet ceremony, a few witnesses, paperwork filed away. Life would continue exactly as it had, with only the smallest adjustment to sleeping arrangements. He smiled in the darkness. Love. Young people mistook so many things for love. Morning came too fast. Naomi stood in the small chapel behind the manor, her hands shaking despite her efforts to still them. Miss Beatrice had helped her dress in a simple blue dress, not fancy, but clean and pressed. Her head wrap was fresh, tied in the way her mama used to do. The chapel was plain, wooden benches, a small altar, windows that let in pale light. Jonathan stood at the front in his Sunday clothes. Pastor Wells, a thin man with nervous eyes, held a worn Bible. Master Harrow sat in the front row, watching. Naomi had learned of the marriage only last night when Miss Beatrice came to the quarters and explained the situation. There had been no proposal, no courting, no choice, just Miss Beatrice's tired voice saying, "Child, you're getting married tomorrow morning. Master's orders. Jonathan Harrow will be your husband." Naomi had wanted to run, to refuse, to do anything but accept it. But Miss Beatrice had gripped her hands and said, "Listen to me. Master threatened to sell you Louisiana away if this don't happen. Maybe this gives you a chance. Maybe not. But it's the only choice you got right now." So here she stood, walking toward a future she didn't choose, wearing a dress that felt like a shroud. Pastor Wells began the ceremony. His voice sounded hollow in the small space. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." Jonathan looked at her. There was something in his eyes, hope, guilt, that made Naomi want to scream. He thought he was saving her. He thought this was love. But Naomi knew better. This was ownership with a blessing. This was her cage being painted to look like a home. "Do you, Jonathan Harrow, take this woman?" Jonathan's voice was steady. "I do. And do, Naomi, take this man." Naomi looked past the pastor, past Jonathan toward the small window. She could see a sliver of sky, blue and distant. "I do," she whispered, because there were no other words she was allowed to say. Pastor Wells blessed them quickly, perfunctorily. Master Harrow nodded approval from his pew. The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. "You may kiss the bride," Pastor Wells said, closing his Bible. Jonathan leaned forward. Naomi turned her head slightly, so his lips brushed her cheek instead of her mouth. It was the smallest rebellion she could manage. "Welcome to the family," Master Harrow said, standing. "Now let's get back to work. Naomi, Miss Beatrice needs you in the kitchen. Wedding supper tonight, we'll have guests." And just like that, her wedding morning ended. She was married and still enslaved, a wife who remained property, bound by vows that meant everything and nothing at all. As she walked back to the kitchen, Jonathan called after her, "Naomi, wait." But she kept walking. If she stopped, if she let him speak, she might break entirely. And she couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not when she still had to cook, still had to smile, still had to survive this day and every day after. Behind her, the chapel door closed with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The kitchen buzzed with activity. By mid, the wedding supper required extra effort. Master Harrow had invited several families from neighboring plantations, wanting to show off his son's new arrangement without explaining its peculiar details. Naomi moved through her tasks mechanically. Ham needed glazing. Vegetables needed chopping. And Master Harrow had specifically requested her specialty, a custard dessert layered with cream and topped with caramelized sugar. She'd made it dozens of times, always to praise. "Naomi, fetch the cream from the spring house," Miss Beatrice said. "And check the sugar stores, we'll need plenty." Naomi nodded. The spring house sat behind the kitchen, built over a cold stream to keep dairy fresh. Inside, the air was cool and damp. She collected the cream, still good, then moved to the pantry for sugar. The plantation bought supplies in bulk to save money. Master Harrow was prosperous, but careful with his accounts. He'd recently purchased a large shipment of imported sugar, 50 pounds, at a reduced price because the merchant needed to clear his warehouse quickly. Naomi lifted the cloth sack. It felt slightly heavier than usual, denser. When she opened it, the sugar looked normal enough white crystals, fine ground. But when she touched it, her fingers came away faintly damp. She frowned. Sugar should be dry, should pour easy. This clumped slightly, as if it had been stored somewhere humid. "Miss Beatrice," she called, "this sugar seems off." Miss Beatrice came over, felt the sugar herself, then shrugged. "Probably just the spring dampness getting into the pantry. It'll dissolve fine in the custard. Master Harrow will have our hides if we waste expensive ingredients." Naomi hesitated. Something felt wrong. But Miss Beatrice was right. Wasting supplies meant trouble. And if she refused to use it, she'd have to explain. Would have to make accusations about the master's purchasing decisions. Would have to risk being seen as difficult on her wedding day. She carried the sugar to the work table and began measuring. 3 cups for the custard, 2 more for the caramel topping. The damp texture bothered her, but Miss Beatrice was watching, and other women were waiting to use the workspace. Naomi mixed the custard, as she always did, eggs and cream, vanilla and sugar, slow-heated until it thickened. She poured it into the serving dish, let it set, then made the caramel topping. The sugar melted beautifully, turned amber gold, hardened into that perfect crackable crust everyone loved. The dessert looked perfect when she finished. Beautiful. Exactly as it should be. She set it aside too, cool, and moved on to the next task. Somewhere in the back of her mind, unease stirred, but she pushed it down. She had no choice. She had work to do. Guests to feed, a role to play as the cook, who'd been elevated however impossibly too. Wife, the afternoon passed. Dishes came together. The table was set in the dining room with the good china. Candles were placed. Everything was ready. Evening settled soft over the plantation. Guests arrived in carriages, 3 families from neighboring properties, all curious about the Harrow boys' sudden marriage. Master Harrow greeted them smoothly, offering just enough information to satisfy without inviting questions. A private ceremony, he said. Simple. Jonathan's always been devout, wanted something humble before God. The guests nodded, understanding. Young men often had their peculiarities, especially educated ones who'd spent time at university. The meal began. Ham and vegetables, bread and preserves, wine from the master's cellar. Conversation flowed around the table, talk of crops and weather, politics and trade. Jonathan sat stiffly, sane. Little Naomi remained in the kitchen, as was expected. Enslaved women didn't dine with guests, married or not. "This ham is excellent," one of the wives said. "William, you're blessed to have such skilled kitchen help." Master Harrow beamed. Indeed, best cook in 3 counties. When dessert time came, Miss Beatrice carried out Naomi's custard with careful pride. It gleamed in the candlelight cream-colored custard under a perfect golden brown crust of caramelized sugar. "Beautiful," one guest exclaimed. Master Harrow personally cracked the caramel with a silver spoon, served each guest a generous portion. They ate with appreciation, complimenting the balance of sweetness, the smooth texture. "You must give my cook this recipe," one woman said. Master Harrow promised he would. He took a large portion himself, savoring each bite. Around the table, spoons clinked against fine china. Candles flickered. For a moment, everything seemed perfect, exactly the genteel evening Master Harrow had orchestrated. Then Judge Morrison, a large man who'd eaten 2 helpings, coughed. Once, twice, he reached for his water glass with a shaking hand. "You all right, Jings?" Master Harrow asked. Judge Morrison coughed harder. His face had gone pale. "I feel," he began, but couldn't finish. He pushed back from the table suddenly, hands gripping the edge. Mrs. Taylor, seated across from him, set down her spoon. "I don't feel well either," she said. Her voice sounded thin. "Excuse me." She stood, but her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed back into her chair, one hand pressed to her stomach. Around the table, faces began to change. Color draining, hands shaking. Someone's glass fell, wine spilling like blood across the white tablecloth. "What's happening?" Jonathan was on his feet. "Father!" But Master Harrow was bent over his plate, his own face going gray. He looked up at his son, and for the first time in Jonathan's memory, there was fear in his father's eyes. In the kitchen, Naomi heard the commotion. She moved toward the dining room door, but Miss Beatrice grabbed her arm. "Don't!" the older woman said. "Whatever's happening in there, you don't want to be seen right now." But it was too late. The door opened. Jonathan stood there, his face stricken. "Someone fetch a doctor!" he shouted, toward the yard. Then he looked at Naomi. "The dessert. What did you put in the dessert?" Naomi's breath caught. "The usual ingredients. Eggs, cream, sugar." "Where did the sugar come from?" "The pantry. The new shipment. Jonathan's expression crumbled. In the dining room behind him, someone screamed. The sound was raw and animal, full of agony. Naomi felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. She hadn't done anything wrong. She'd made the dessert exactly as she always did. But she knew with the terrible clarity of someone who'd lived her whole life in chains that wrong didn't matter. Only blame mattered, and blame always rolled downhill to those who couldn't protect themselves. Miss Beatrice still gripped her arm. "Lord, have mercy," the older woman whispered. "Lord, have mercy on this child." Through the doorway, Naomi could see guests writhing in their chairs, could hear retching and crying, could see Master Harrow clutching his chest as if his heart was trying to break through his ribs. She'd made the dessert with the sugar she'd been told to use. She'd questioned it, been overruled. She'd done everything right. And still, she knew this would be laid at her feet. The candles in the dining room flickered. Someone fell from their chair, a woman sobbed. And Naomi stood frozen, watching her wedding day become the day she'd be blamed for the dying. The night stretched long and terrible. Doctors came, 2 of them, summoned from town by frantic riders. They moved through the dining room and parlor, where guests had been laid out, checking pulses, asking questions nobody could answer clearly. By midnight, the count was 4 dead. Judge Morrison first, then Mrs. Taylor, then 2 others. 8 more lay sick, violently ill, but still breathing. Master Harrow among them, gray-faced and shaken in his bed upstairs. Jonathan paced the hallway like a caged animal. His hands trembled. Every few minutes he'd stop at his father's door, listen to the labored breathing within, then resume his pacing. In the kitchen, Naomi sat on a stool while Miss Beatrice stood guard at the door. The other kitchen women had been sent away. Only these 2 remained, the accused and the witness who'd told her to use the sugar anyway. "We both saw it was damp," Naomi said, her voice hollow. "We both felt it. I know, child." Miss Beatrice's face was lined with worry. "I know. Then why? Because waste brings punishment to, because we're taught not to question. Because," Miss Beatrice's voice cracked, "because I made a mistake, and you're the one who'll pay for it." Footsteps approached. Both women stiffened. The door opened and Master Harrow's head overseer appeared, a hard man named Carlson with cold eyes and no mercy in him. "You," he said, pointing at Naomi. "Come with me." "Where?" Miss Beatrice stepped forward. "Where are you taking her?" "To wait. Master's orders soon as he could speak. He said to secure her until this gets sorted." Naomi stood. Her legs felt like water, but she forced them to hold her. "I didn't poison anyone. I made the dessert, same as all was not my concern." Carlson grabbed her arm. His grip was iron. "You can tell it to whoever needs to hear it. Right now, you're coming to the holding cell." Miss Beatrice reached for Naomi's hand, squeezed it once. "I'll tell them the truth," she whispered. "I promised you, child. I'll tell them." But Naomi saw the fear in the older woman's eyes. The truth might not matter. The truth might not even be heard. Carlson pulled her through the night. The holding cell sat behind the barn, a small stone structure with a heavy door and one high window. It smelled of damp earth and old fear. Carlson pushed her inside, slammed the door, threw the bolt. Darkness swallowed her whole. Naomi sank to the floor. The stones were cold through her dress, the blue dress she'd worn this morning when they'd called it a wedding. It felt like years ago. It felt like another life entirely. She pulled her knees to her chest and began to pray. Not words. She had no words left. Just a desperate reaching toward God that happens when everything else is stripped away. "Lord, I didn't do this. You know I didn't do this. Please." But the darkness gave no answers. Outside, she could hear voices calling, wagons departing as some guests were taken home. Someone was weeping on broken sobs that cut through the night. By dawn, the count had risen to 8 dead. Morning came gray and heavy. Naomi hadn't slept. She'd prayed, wept, prayed again. Now she sat with her back against the wall, staring at nothing. The bolt scraped. The door opened. Light flooded in, blinding after the dark hours. Carlson stood there with 2 other men. "Out," he said. Naomi stood on shaking legs. They took her to the yard, where everyone was assembled all, the enslaved people from the quarters, the remaining house staff, field hands brought in from the cotton rows. They stood in a half circle, silent and afraid. Master Harrow was there too, propped in a chair that'd been carried from the house. He looked 20 years older than yesterday. His skin was the color of old parchment, but his eyes were clear and cold. 12 dead now, he said, his voice raspy. 12 people came to my table last night. Good people, respected people. And 12 are in coffins this morning because of poison. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Naomi felt every eye turn toward her. The desert was the source, Master Harrow continued. Everyone who ate it became ill. Those who ate the most died first. Those who took only a taste might yet recover. He coughed, pressed a hand to his chest. The woman who made that dessert stands before you. Jonathan stood behind his father's chair. His face was ashen. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Naomi, Master Harrow said, step forward. She did, though her legs barely carried her. The crowd potted around her like water around a stone. Did you make the dessert served last night? Yes, sir. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Did you add anything unusual to it? Anything not in the normal recipe? No, sir. I made it same as always. But the sugar, it was damp. I told Miss Beatrice. The sugar was fine, Master Harrow interrupted. Imported, expensive, bought from a reputable merchant. The sugar was not the problem. Naomi's breath caught. She looked at Miss Beatrice, who stood at the edge of the crowd. The older woman's face was stricken, but she said nothing. Then what? Naomi began. The problem, Master Harrow said, is that someone wanted people dead. Someone added something to that dessert, and the person with access, the person with opportunity, the person who stood to gain. He paused, letting the words sink in. Is you gain? Naomi's voice broke. What would I gain? I got nothing to gain from this. You became my son's wife yesterday. Perhaps you thought poisoning me would give you freedom faster, give you control of property. No, the word tore from her. No, sir, I didn't. Father, that's absurd. Jonathan finally spoke. She had no reason? Then you tell me. Master Harrow turned his cold gaze on his son. 12 people dead from a desert she made. You have another explanation? Jonathan's mouth worked, but no sound came out. Naomi watched him struggle, watched him search for words that wouldn't come. This was the man who'd married her yesterday, the man who'd claimed to love her. And he stood there, silent, while his father laid murder at her feet. The sheriff is coming, Master Harrow said. Until he arrives, she remained secured. After that, he coughed again, harder this time. After that, justice will take its course. 2 men grabbed Naomi's arms. She didn't fight. There was no point. Around her, the crowd murmured, some sympathetic, some angry, all afraid. Because if Naomi could be accused of this, anyone could be accused of anything. They dragged her back to the cell. The door slammed. The bolt threw. This time, when darkness came, Naomi didn't pray for rescue. She prayed for strength to endure what was coming, because she understood now Master Harrow needed someone to blame, needed to show he was taking action, needed to prove to the other plantation owners that he ran a tight operation, that such things didn't happen on his watch without swift consequence. The truth didn't matter. Her innocence didn't matter. She was convenient. She was powerless. She was exactly the kind of person the law was designed to crush. She was going to hang, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. In the manor house study, Jonathan stood before his father's desk for the second time in 2 days. But this time, he wasn't asking for anything. This time, he was being told, "Sit down, son." Master Harrow's voice was still weak, but his will was iron. Jonathan sat. He felt numb, hollowed out. "You love that girl," his father said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Then you need to make a choice right now. A choice that'll determine your entire future. Jonathan looked up. His father was watching him with something almost like pity. "You can defend her. Stand up in front of the sheriff. in front of the whole county, and say you believe in her innocence. You can tie yourself to her fate." Master Harrow paused. "And when they hang her, they will hang her. Jonathan, you'll be ruined. Your reputation destroyed. Your inheritance forfeit. I'll cut you off entirely. You'll be a laughingstock. The fool who loved a murderer." "She's not a murderer." Or, his father continued, as if Jonathan hadn't spoken, "you can stay silent. Let justice proceed. You're young. You'll recover from this. In a year, we'll find you a proper wife. You'll inherit the plantation. You'll have the life you were meant to have." Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. "How can you ask me to do that? I'm not asking. I'm telling you the reality of your situation." Master Harrow leaned forward. "Son, I know you think love conquers all. I know you believe in righteousness and divine providence, but the world doesn't work that way. The world works on power and property and who has the law on their side. The law is supposed to be just. The law is a tool, and right now, it's a tool being used to clean up a disaster. 12 people are dead. Their families want blood. The sheriff wants a neat resolution. Giving him Naomi gives everyone what they need." Jonathan stood abruptly. "She's innocent. The sugar was bad, eh? Heard her say it was damp. The sugar was purchased from a reputable merchant. I have receipts. It was stored properly. It was fine." His father's voice hardened. "And even if it wasn't, Ivan, if there was some problem with storage, that's an accident. What happened last night was deliberate poisoning. Someone added something toxic. The only person with opportunity was Naomi." "That's not true. Anyone could have." "Who?" "Jonathan. Who else had access to that kitchen? Who else made that dessert?" Master Harrow stood slowly, wincing with the effort. "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to hear it clearly. If you fight me on this, I will destroy you. I will see you penniless and homeless. I will make sure every door in this state closes to you. Is that what you want? To throw away everything for a woman who's going to die anyway?" The words hit like fists. Jonathan staggered back a step. "Choose, son. Choose now. Your future or hers. Because you can't have both." Jonathan looked at his father, the man who'd raised him, educated him, taught him to read and cipher and manage property, the man who was asking him to abandon everything he claimed to believe. "I need time," Jonathan whispered. "You have until the sheriff arrives this afternoon. After that, whatever you haven't said will be taken as silence, and silence will be taken as agreement." Master Harrow moved to the door. "Choose wisely. Jonathan, choose what you can live with." He left. Jonathan sank back into the chair. Through the window, he could see the holding cell behind the barn, could see the stone walls that held Naomi. He thought of yesterday's wedding, thought of her face when she'd said, "I do not with joy, but with resignation." She'd known even then what this marriage meant. She'd known it was a cage, just painted prettier. And now she was in an actual cage, accused of murder, facing the noose, and he had to choose between saving himself or trying to save her, knowing that trying might mean both of them destroyed. Jonathan put his head in his hands. He prayed for guidance, but the only answer he heard was the sound of his own heart breaking. In the cell, Naomi heard voices outside, old voices, women's voices, speaking soft through the high window. "Child, you hear us?" It was Ruth, one of the elder women from the quarters, and beside her, Naomi could hear Sarah and Mercy, the ones who'd raised her after her mama passed. "I hear ya," Naomi called up. "We can't stay long. They watching. But we wanted you to know. We know. You didn't do this." "We know." Tears burned Naomi's eyes. "It won't matter what you know. Maybe not. Maybe so." Ruth's voice was fierce despite her age. "But you gotta stay strong. Child, you've gotta hold on to who you are, no matter what they say about you." "I'm scared," Naomi whispered. "Of course you're scared. Ain't nothing wrong with being scared. Fear just means you're still alive, still feeling." Sarah's voice now. "But don't let fear take your soul. That's the only thing they can't touch unless you let them. Remember Daniel," Mercy added. "Remember he went to the lion's den, trusting God would see him through. You got to trust too. Daniel was delivered," Naomi said. "What if I'm not?" Silence. Then Ruth spoke again. and her voice was gentle as rain. "Then you get delivered into glory, child. Either way, you get delivered. This world ain't the end of the story." Footsteps approached. The women scattered like birds before a storm. Naomi heard them go, heard their soft voices fading into distance. She was alone again, but something had changed. The elder women had given her what they could not rescue, not legal help, but something deeper. They'd reminded her that her worth didn't depend on what Master Harrow or the sheriff or anyone else said about her. She was Naomi. She was a child of God. She was innocent. And whatever happened next, that truth remained. She stood, pressed her hands against a cold stone wall, and began to sing soft Achi first, then stronger, the old hymn her mama used to sing, "Amazing Grace." How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Outside, people paused in their work to listen. The sound carried across the yard, clear and unbroken. "I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see." In the manor house, Jonathan heard it through his window. He closed his eyes, and something hardened in his chest, not his heart, but his spine, his resolve. He stood, walked to his father's study, found the old man at his desk, writing letters to the families of the dead. "I've made my choice," Jonathan said. His father looked up, "And I'm going to tell the truth. All have it. About the damp sugar, about your cheap purchasing, about forcing this marriage. All of it." Master Harrow's expression didn't change. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe, but I'm a fool who can still look at himself in the mirror." Jonathan turned to leave. "You'll lose everything." His father called after him. "I already have," Jonathan said. "The question is whether I lose my soul too." He walked out before his courage could fail, walked to his room, and began writing everything down, a statement, witnessed and dated, detailing every conversation, every compromise, every moment that led to this catastrophe. If he was going to burn, at least he'd burn clean. Afternoon brought the sheriff a solid man named Porter, who'd known Master Harrow for 20 years. He arrived with a deputy and a stern expression, ready to take custody of a prisoner. But he also brought someone else, Dr. Samuel Green, the newly appointed county medical examiner, a younger man who'd studied in Philadelphia and brought new ideas about evidence and investigation. "William," Sheriff Porter said, greeting Master Harrow in the yard. "Terrible business. Just terrible." Indeed, Master Harrow still looked ill, but he dressed properly, presented himself as a man in control. "The prisoner is secured, ready for transport." About that, Dr. Green stepped forward. "I'd like to examine the bodies first, if you don't mind. All 12. I need to confirm the cause of death before we proceed with charges." Master Harrow frowned. "The cause is obvious. Poison in the dessert, perhaps, but there are different kinds of poison, different symptoms, different speeds of action. I need to document this properly for trial." Dr. Green's voice was respectful but firm. "It's the new standard. The state medical board requires it." Sheriff Porter nodded. "He's right. William got to do this by the book. Especially with so many dead, this case will draw attention from Richmond." Master Harrow couldn't refuse without appearing obstructive. "Very well. The bodies are in the ice house. Take whatever time you need." Dr. Green spent the rest of the afternoon in careful examination. He took no cheese, collected samples, asked questions about what each person had eaten and drunk. He was methodical, thorough, By evening, he had his initial findings. He called Sheriff Porter and Master Harrow to the ice house to share them. "Gentlemen," he said, "I don't believe this was poison." Master Harrow straightened. "What? The symptoms are all wrong for common poisons. New convulsions, no hemorrhaging, no burn marks around the mouth. What I'm seeing is consistent with bacterial toxicity specifically, a type caused by contaminated sugar. The sugar was fine. Was it stored in a humid environment? No." Green interrupted gently. "Because sugar, especially imported cane sugar, can develop a particular kind of mold if it's kept damp. That mold produces toxins. When the sugar is heated, as in making custard or caramel, the toxins concentrate, they become deadly." Sheriff Porter pulled out his notebook. "You're saying this was an accident?" "I'm saying it needs further investigation. I'd like to examine the sugar stores. And I'd like to see the purchasing records find out where this shipment came from, how it was transported, how it was stored." Master Harrow's face had gone pale again, but this time not from illness. "That's not necessary." "It is. Actually," Sheriff Porter said, "Sam's right. If this goes to trial, we need complete evidence. And if it wasn't deliberate poisoning," he looked at Master Harrow meaningfully, "then we've got a different situation entirely." Dr. Green was already walking toward the manor. "Let's start with those records." As they went inside, Naomi heard footsteps approaching her cell. The bolt scraped. Jonathan stood in the doorway, holding papers. "The doctor says it might not have been poison," he said quickly. "He thinks it was the sugar bad storage. Mold, toxins. He's investigating." Naomi stared at him. Hope was a dangerous thing. She'd learned not to let it in. "And you?" she asked. "What do you think?" Jonathan met her eye. "I think you told the truth. I think my father cut corners to save money. I think he's trying to blame you for his mistake." He held up the papers. "I wrote it all down. Everything. I'm giving this to the sheriff." "You'll lose everything," Naomi said, echoing his father's words. "I know." Jonathan's voice was steady now, stronger than she'd heard it. "But I can't lose myself. Not for land or money or anything else." He turned to go, then paused. "Naomi! I'm sorry. I should have chosen better from the start. Should have found a way to free you, not trap you in a marriage that still kept you enslaved. I thought I was being clever. I thought I was saving you. But I was really just saving myself from making the hard choice." Naomi said nothing. There was nothing to say. His apology couldn't undo the past day, couldn't bring back the dead, couldn't erase the terror of being accused. But it was something. It was more than silence. "Whatever happens," Jonathan said, "I'm going to tell the truth now. All of it." He left. The door stayed open this time. Through it, Naomi could see the yard, the people moving about their work, could see the sky turning gold with sunset. She stepped to the doorway but didn't leave. Not yet. She was still accused, still imprisoned by more than a locked door. But for the first time since the dessert was served, she felt the possibilities small and fragile as a candled flame that truth might actually matter, that justice might actually come, that deliverance might take a different form than she'd imagined. She stood in the doorway, between darkness and light, waiting to see which way the world would turn. Dr. Green worked through the evening with the focus of a man who believed in evidence over assumption. Sheriff Porter stood beside him in the plantation storehouse, watching as the young doctor examined the sugar supplies with careful attention. "Here," Dr. Green said, holding a handful of the imported sugar to the lamplight. "See how it That's moisture damage, and this discoloration very faint. But it's there." Sheriff Porter squinted. "Could be just shadow. Could be, but combined with the symptoms I documented." Dr. Green pulled out a glass vial and carefully collected a sample. "I'm sending this to the state laboratory in Richmond. They've got new testing methods can identify specific toxins. That'll take weeks," Sheriff Porter said. "Perhaps, but we can trace the source faster." Dr. Green pulled out the receipt book that Master Harrow's overseer had grudgingly provided. "Look here, this sugar came from Pemberton's warehouse in Norfolk, purchased at 50% discount because it was." He ran his finger down the page. "Age. Stock requiring quick sale due to warehouse relocation." Sheriff Porter's expression shifted. "Aged stock stored in a warehouse by the docks. In Norfolk. In summer, where humidity runs high." Dr. Green made another note. "I'd wager if we checked, we'll find Pemberton sold the same batch to other buyers at discount. And I'd wager some of them had similar problems. You're saying Harrow bought cheap, stored it wrong, and people died because of it. I'm saying that's a possibility we need to investigate before we charge a young woman with 12 murders." Dr. Green closed his notebook. "I'll wire Norfolk tomorrow. Request their records. Meanwhile, I'd like to examine the pantry where this was stored." They moved through the plantation in the gathering dusk. Enslaved people watched them. Pass watched the sheriff and the doctor poking into corners, asking questions, treating this like something that mattered. In the kitchen, Miss Beatrice showed them the pantry. The space was crowded, shelves packed tight with supplies. The floor was dirt, not wood. The walls were stone dotor green. Knelt, touched the ground. His fingers came away damp. There's your problem. Dirt floor, stone walls, no ventilation. This pantry holds moisture like a sponge. Anything stored here long-term would be compromised. The sugar was only here a week, Miss Beatrice said quietly. A week in these conditions is enough, especially if it arrived already damaged. Dr. Green stood, brushed off his hands. Ma'am, when you used this sugar, did you notice anything unusual? Miss Beatrice glanced at Sheriff Porter, then back at the doctor. Fear flickered across her face, the fear of a woman who knew that answering honestly might bring punishment. It's all right, Dr. Green said gently. I'm not looking to assign blame. I'm looking for truth. Miss Beatrice drew a breath. It was damp, Naomi told me. Said it didn't feel right. I told her to use it anyway because Master Harrow don't allow waste. You witnessed her concerns? Yes, sir. She questioned it. I overruled her. Miss Beatrice's voice cracked. That child was doing what she was told. She made that dessert same as always. The only thing different was the sugar. Dr. Green wrote rapidly. Thank you, ma'am. That's very helpful. Sheriff Porter looked at Miss Beatrice with something like respect. You willing to say that under oath? I'm willing to tell the truth, sir, whatever comes of it. They left the kitchen. Outside, Sheriff Porter pulled Dr. Green aside. William Harrow's not going to like this. He's got his mind set on the girl being guilty. Then William Harrow is going to be disappointed. Dr. Green's voice was crisp. I'm the county medical examiner. My job is evidence, not politics. And the evidence says this was contaminated supplies, not deliberate poisoning. You're sure enough to stake your reputation on it? I am. Are you sure enough to do your job regardless of who it embarrasses? Sheriff Porter was quiet a moment. Then, he nadad. I'll do my job. But I'm going to need more than your word before I release that girl. Harrow's already talking about moving her to the county jail, rushing the trial. Give me 3 days. If Norfolk confirms that sugar shipment was compromised, if other buyers report similar problems, if the state lab preliminary comes back supporting my findings, then you'll have enough to stop this prosecution. And if none of that happens, then I'm wrong, and the girl faces trial. Dr. Green met the sheriff's eyes. But I don't think I'm wrong. They walked back toward the manor. Through a window, they could see Master Harrow at his desk, writing letters. He looked up as they approached, his face carefully neutral. Well, he called out, you finished with your investigation? For tonight, Dr. Green said. I'll have more information in a few days. Master Harrow's jaw tightened. The girl should be transferred to proper custody. This plantation is not a jail. She stays here until I complete my examination. Sheriff Porter said, under guard, but she stays. That's how we're doing this. William. For a moment, the two men faced each other, old friends suddenly on opposite sides of an invisible line. Master Harrow was the first to look away. As you say, Sheriff, but I want it noted that I requested proper procedure. It's noted. Sheriff Porter tipped his hat. We'll be back tomorrow. They left. Master Harrow watched them go, then turned to find Jonathan standing in the hallway behind him. You talked to them, Master Harrow said. It wasn't a question. I told the truth. About this sugar. About the wedding terms. About everything. You fool. Master Harrow's voice was cold. You've destroyed yourself for nothing. Not nothing. For what's right. Master Harrow laughed a bitter sound. Right? That's what young men always think matters. You'll learn. I've already learned, Jonathan said. I've learned what happens when good people stay silent. I've learned what compromise with evil looks like. I've learned that there are some things I can't live with. He turned and walked away before his father could respond. Walked out into the yard, past the barn to the holding cell, where Naomi sat in the doorway. The doctor thinks he can prove it was the sugar, Jonathan said. He's sending inquiries to Norfolk, getting the shipment records checked. Naomi looked up at him. In the fading light, her face was unreadable. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I should have done it from the start. Because I'm trying to become the man I claimed to be instead of the coward I actually was. That don't change nothing between us," Naomi said quietly. "Even if I go free, even if your father's fraud gets exposed, I'm still enslaved. You still married me without giving me choice. You still thought you could love me and own me at the same time." Jonathan flinched, but he didn't argue. "You're right. So what happens after? Say that doctor proves I'm innocent. Say they drop the charges. Then what? I go back to the kitchen. Live in your cottage like a wife who ain't really a wife. Pretend this marriage is anything but another kind of cage? I don't know," Jonathan admitted. "I haven't thought that far." "Well, you better start thinking." Naomi stood. "Because I ain't going back to how things were. I can't. Something broke in me when you stayed silent yesterday morning, when your father accused me and you didn't say a word. And it ain't something that fixes just because you found your courage a day late." She walked back into the cell and sat in the corner, her back to him. The conversation was over. Jonathan stood there a moment longer, then turned away. He'd told himself that testifying would make things right, but Naomi was teaching him a harder truth. Some betrayals couldn't be undone with mere honesty. Some damage went deeper than words could heal. He'd married her, thinking love was enough. Now he was learning that love without justice, love without freedom, love without true partnership, that wasn't love at all. It was just another form of ownership, dressed up in prettier words. The next morning brought a visitor nobody expected, a traveling preacher named Silas Crawford, who'd been making his circuit through Virginia's plantations, preaching to enslaved people with the master's grudging permission. He was a lean man, weathered like old wood, with eyes that had seen too much suffering and still chose kindness. He arrived on foot, carrying a worn Bible and a bedroll, asking permission to speak with the accused. Master Hero wanted to refuse, but denying a preacher access looked bad, especially now with the sheriff watching everything closely, so he gave permission 15 minutes. Supervised, Reverend Crawford ducked into the cell. Naomi looked up, startled. She didn't know this man. "Peace be with you, daughter," he said, settling onto the floor across from her. The guard stood just outside the door, listening. "And with you," Naomi replied automatically. "I heard about what happened here. Heard you're accused of something you didn't do." Naomi said nothing. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I'm not here to preach at you," Reverend Crawford said. "I'm here to listen, if you want to talk, and to pray with you, if you'll allow it." Something in his voice, the genuine kindness, the lack of judgment, broke through Naomi's defenses. She started talking, not about the accusations, but about everything else, about being married without choice, about feeling trapped between one cage and another, about the terror of being blamed for deaths she didn't cause. Reverend Crawford listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet, a long moment. "You know what I see when I look at you?" he finally said. "I see a woman of extraordinary faith. You're still standing, still speaking truth, still holding on to who you are, even when the world's trying to break you." "I don't feel strong," Naomi whispered. "Strength isn't about feeling it. Strength is about choosing it, moment by moment, even when you're terrified." He opened his Bible. "May I read you something?" She nodded. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." He looked up. "You're both those things right now, brokenhearted and crushed. But the promise is that you're not alone in it. That even in this cell, even facing what you're facing, you're seen, you're known, you're loved." Tears slipped down Naomi's cheeks. "What if they hang me anyway? What if the truth don't matter?" Then you walk to that gallows knowing who you are, knowing your worth, knowing that this world's injustice doesn't have the final word. Reverend Crawford's voice was firm. "But I don't think it's coming to that. I've been hearing things about a doctor asking questions, about evidence pointing elsewhere. I think truth is working its way to light. You got more faith than me? Then? Maybe! Or maybe I've just seen enough to know that sometimes deliverance comes in ways we don't expect." He stood. "I'm going to be in the area a few more days. I'll check on you again, if they allow it. Meanwhile, you hold fast to this. You are not what they accuse you of. You are a beloved child of God, and nothing not chains not cells. Not even death itself can change that truth. He prayed over her then, a simple prayer for strength and justice and peace. When he left, something had shifted in Naomi's chest. Not hope exactly, she was still too afraid for that, but something like solid ground beneath her feet, a reminder that her worth wasn't determined by Master Harrow's accusations or the sheriff's decisions or even Jonathan's belated courage. She was who she was, innocent, faithful, unbroken, even if bent near to breaking, and that would have to be enough to carry her through whatever came next. 2 days later, the telegraph messages started arriving. The first came from Norfolk. Pemberton's warehouse confirmed that the sugar shipment in question had been stored improperly for 6 months, showed visible damage, and was sold at steep discounts specifically because of concerns about quality. 3 other buyers had reported problems ranging from off-days to illness. The second came from Richmond. Preliminary tests on Dr. Green's samples showed presence of bacterial toxins consistent with fungal contamination in improperly stored sugar. Full analysis would take 2 more weeks. But initial findings supported the hypothesis of accidental poisoning rather than deliberate murder. The third came from a plantation 50 miles south. 2 deaths 3 weeks prior. Same symptoms traced to a dessert made with sugar from the same Norfolk shipment. Dr. Green laid all 3 telegrams on Sheriff Porter's desk. There's your pattern. Contaminated sugar sold cheap to multiple buyers. Harrow wasn't the only one who purchased it, and Naomi wasn't the only cook who used it. This was negligence at the warehouse level, compounded by negligence at the storage level, not murder. Sheriff Porter read through the messages twice. What about the other plantation deaths? Were charges filed? No. They were treated as mysterious illness. Nobody thought to investigate the sugar. Dr. Green tapped the papers. We only caught it here because I happen to be new to the position. Happen to believe in thorough examination. Otherwise, Naomi would already be in jail awaiting trial. Or already hanged. Sheriff Porter said grimly. You know how fast these things can move when the accused is enslaved? Which is why we're stopping it now. Dr. Green stood. I'm going to write my official report. The cause of death was accidental poisoning via contaminated sugar supplies. Naomi is innocent. The charges must be dropped. Harrow won't like it. Harrow can take it up with the state medical board. But the evidence is clear. Dr. Green's jaw set. No one is dying or being imprisoned because a warehouse in Norfolk cut corners and Harrow was too cheap to buy proper supplies. They rode out to the plantation that afternoon. The yard was quiet after noon. Most people at work in the fields or the manor. Dr. Green and Sheriff Porter went directly to Master Harrow's study. He sat at his desk, looking worse than before. The illness had taken its toll, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. Sheriff! Doctor, I assume you have news. We do. Sheriff Porter laid out the telegrams. The sugar was contaminated. Other plantations had similar problems from the same shipment. The deaths here were accidental, not deliberate. Naomi is cleared of all charges. Master Harrow's face went very still. You're certain? Completely. Dr. Green's examination, the laboratory tests, the pattern across multiple sites, it all points to warehouse negligence, not murder. I see. Master Harrow looked down at the papers. And who bears responsibility? Then Pemberton's warehouse in Norfolk for improper storage and selling damaged goods. You, for purchasing cheap supplies without proper inspection and storing them in inadequate conditions. The overseer who maintained those storage conditions. Dr. Green's voice was clinical. There's plenty of blame to go around, but none of it falls on Naomi, so she walks free. She was never properly arrested, so there's nothing to walk free from, Sheriff Porter said. But yes, she's cleared immediately. Master Harrow was quiet a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. I'll have her released from the cell. There's more, Dr. Green said. The families of the deceased will likely seek restitution. You purchased and served contaminated food. In the eyes of the law, that makes you liable. How much? That's for the courts to determine. But I'd estimate significant, possibly enough to require selling land to cover. Master Harrow's hands clenched on the desk. His empire built on cheap labor and cheaper supplies was crumbling, and he couldn't blame it on anyone but himself. "Get out," he said quietly. "William Sheriff," Porter began. "I said get out. You've delivered your news. You've made your point. Now leave my property." They left, found Jonathan waiting in the hall. He'd been listening, his face a mixture of relief and something harder. "She's free?" he asked. "Cleared completely," Dr. Green confirmed. Jonathan closed his eyes. "Thank God." "You might want to tell her yourself," Sheriff Porter said, "though I reckon she'd want to hear it from us official-like first." They walked to the cell together. Naomi stood when she saw them come and stood straight and tall, despite everything, her chin lifted. "Naomi," Sheriff Porter said, "on behalf of the county, I apologize for the accusation. Dr. Green's investigation has proven your complete innocence. You're free to go." She stared at him. Free to go where? The question hung in the air, because she wasn't free, not really. She was cleared of murder charges, but she was still enslaved, still owned, still trapped in a marriage that was really just another form of bondage. "That's—" Sheriff Porter faltered. He looked at Jonathan. Jonathan stepped forward. He held a folded paper in his hands. "Naomi, I can't undo the past days. Can't undo forcing you into marriage. Can't undo my father's cruelty or my own cowardice. But I can do this." He held out the paper. "It's a manumission document. I had a lawyer in town draw it up last night. My father gave me authority over you as part of the marriage terms. So I'm using that authority to free you. Completely legally." Naomi took the paper with shaking hands, unfolded it. Read the formal language that meant she belonged to herself, that she could walk away, that she was, for the first time in her life, actually free. "The marriage," she began, "is void. If you want it to be, I'll sign annulment papers. You could take a new name, go wherever you want. I've also arranged," Jonathan pulled out a small purse, "for you to have money. It's not much, but it's enough to get you north, get you started somewhere new." Naomi looked from the papers to Jonathan's face. "Why now?" "Because it's what I should have done from the beginning. Because owning someone and loving them is a lie I can't live with anymore." His voice cracked. "You were right. You can't be owned and free at the same time. If I love you, if I ever really loved you, then the only thing I can do is let you go." Tears streamed down Naomi's face. Not tears of joy, this was too complicated for joy, but tears of release, of a weight finally lifting. "Where will you go?" Jonathan asked. "I don't know yet." Naomi folded the papers carefully, tucked them into her dress. "But I reckon I'll figure it out." She walked past him, past the sheriff and doctor, out into the yard. The sun was lowering toward the horizon. People were coming in from the fields. She saw Miss Beatrice at the kitchen door, saw Ruth and Sarah by the quarters. Naomi raised the papers high. "I'm free," she called out. "The charges are dropped, and I'm free." A sound rose from the gathered people, not quite a cheer, more like a collective exhale, relief and wonder and cautious joy. Miss Beatrice came running, wrapped Naomi in her arms. "Thank the Lord," the older woman whispered. "Thank the Lord." Naomi held her tight. Then she pulled back, looked at the faces around her, the people who'd prayed for her, who'd spoken courage through the cell wall, who'd believed in her innocence when the whole world seemed ready to call her guilty. "I'm going north," she said, "soon as I can arrange it. But I wanted you all to know I won't forget this place or these people, won't forget what you've taught me about strength and faith and holding on. You go with God," Ruth said, pressing something into Naomi's hand. A small wooden cross, carved smooth by years of handling. "You carry that, and remember you're never alone." Naomi clutched the cross, nodded. Then she turned back, toward the manor, toward Jonathan, who still stood by the cell, watching. She walked to him. "Thank you," she said, "for finally doing the right thing. It doesn't erase. No, it don't. But it's still right." She paused. "I don't hate you, Jonathan. I can't afford hate. It weighs too much. But I can't love you either. Not the way you wanted. Maybe someday I'll forgive everything that happened. But that day ain't today. I understand. I hope you do. I hope you really learn from this. Learn that love without freedom ain't love. That good intentions without right action ain't worth nothing. That you can't save someone by putting them in a prettier cage. Jonathan nodded. I'm learning. It's a hard lesson. The hardest ones usually are. Naomi looked up at the manor, at Master Harrow's window. What about him? He'll lose most of his wealth-paying restitution. The plantation will likely have to be sold. He'll survive, but he won't thrive. Jonathan's voice was flat. And I won't stay to help him. I'm leaving too. Where? West, I think. Somewhere I can start over, be someone different than I was raised to be. He looked at her. Somewhere I can't hide behind inherited wealth and power. Naomi studied his face, saw the sincerity there, but also the fear. He was about to lose everything he'd known, but he was choosing it this time. Choosing principle over comfort. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said. I hope we both do. They stood in the yard as the sun set. To people whose lives had collided and shattered and were now splitting apart into separate futures. The marriage that had never really been a marriage. The love that had never really been love. The cage that was finally opening. Tomorrow, Naomi would begin planning her journey north. Tomorrow, Jonathan would begin the process of walking away from his father's empire. But tonight, for just this moment, they stood in the strange piece of endings painful, necessary, and somehow, despite everything, right. The days that followed moved slow and deliberate, like walking through water. Naomi remained at the plantation while Reverend Crawford helped arrange her journey north connections with churches, safe houses, people who could be trusted. It would take time to organize properly, and she would not leave in haste, only to find herself stranded or in danger. Master Harrow kept to his study. The restitution claims were piling up, families demanding compensation, the county investigating his business practices, his reputation crumbling like old bread. He saw Naomi in the yard once and turned away, unable or unwilling to meet her eyes. Jonathan worked alongside Reverend Crawford, spending his days writing letters, making arrangements, converting what assets he could into portable funds. His father had indeed cut him off. But Jonathan had some money of his own, small inheritances from his mother's family, savings from his university years. It wasn't much, but it was honest. On the third evening after her release, Jonathan came to find Naomi in the kitchen garden, where she sat watching the sunset. I have something for you, he said, holding out an envelope. Travel documents. Letters of introduction to churches in Pennsylvania and New York. And enough money to keep you comfortable for 6 months while you find work. Naomi took the envelope, but didn't open it. You don't owe me this. I owe you more than I can ever repay. This is just a start. Jonathan sat on the bench beside her, careful to leave space between them. Reverend Crawford says you'll leave in 4 days. There's a wagon heading to Richmond, then a riverboat north. I know, he told me. Naomi turned the envelope over in her hands. What about you? I'm going west. Tennessee first, then maybe Missouri. There's land out there for people willing to work it. No slaves, no inherited wealth. Just hard labor and honest living. You ever done hard labor in your life? Jonathan laughed a surprised, genuine sound. No, I reckon I'm about to learn. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. The air smelled of herbs and turned earth. Lightning bugs began to appear in the gathering dusk. I've been thinking, Naomi said slowly, about forgiveness. Jonathan went still. I ain't there yet, she continued, but I'm thinking about it. Thinking that carrying anger all the way north won't serve me any better than carrying fear or grief. She looked at him. So I'm working toward it. Not for you, for me, because I don't want what happened here to poison the rest of my life. That's more than I deserve. Probably, but forgiveness ain't about deserving. It's about choosing not to let the past own your future. She paused. I won't forget what happened. Won't pretend it was anything but what it was. But I'm going to try to release the weight of it. Try to walk free in my heart the same way I'm walking free in law. Jonathan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet. I might change my mind tomorrow. But there was something almost gentle in her voice. You're really going to leave all this behind? The land, the comfort, everything you knew. I have to. I can't become someone different while staying in the same place. The man I was here, the one who thought he could own people and love them, who stayed silent when he should have spoken, who chose comfort over courage. That man can't exist out west. There's no room for him there. You might find it harder than you think. Changing yourself? I expect so, but I have to try. He stood. Naomi, when you get north, when you build your new life, I hope you find everything you deserve. Joy and peace, and people who see your worth. I hope you find a kitchen where you cook freely. I hope you find love that honors you instead of trapping you. Naomi stood too. For a moment they faced each other in the dimming light, two people who'd been bound together by force and were now separating by choice. I hope you'll find yourself out west, she said. The man you want to be instead of the one you were raised to be. I hope the work is hard enough to teach you, and I hope you're strong enough to learn. She held out her hand. Jonathan took it, shook it formally. Goodbye, Naomi. Goodbye, Jonathan. He walked away toward the manor. Naomi watched him go, then turned back to the garden. The sky was deepening to purple. Stars were beginning to show. In 4 days, she would leave this place forever. She would travel north into unknown country, toward a future she couldn't yet imagine. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was hers. She touched a wooden cross in her pocket, Truth's gift. Then she pulled out the manumission papers and read them again by the last light. The legal language that meant she belonged to herself, that no one could take her, sell her, use her as property ever again. Free. The word still felt strange, but she was learning to believe it. The day of departure came clear and bright. Naomi woke in the quarters for the last time, surrounded by the women who'd raised her. They helped her pack the few belongings she had, a spare dress. The prayer book Jonathan had returned to her, the wooden cross, her manumission papers wrapped in oilcloth to keep them safe. Miss Beatrice pressed a bundle into her hands. Food for the journey, and some recipes written down, in case you want to cook them again someday. Naomi's throat tightened. Thank you for everything, for teaching me, for protecting me when you could hush now. Miss Beatrice pulled her into a fierce hug. You taught me something too. Taught me about courage, about speaking truth, even when it's dangerous. I should have spoken up sooner about that, Sugar. Should have stood up for you faster. I'm sorry I didn't. You spoke when it mattered. That's what counts. The elder women gathered around Ruth and Sarah and Mercy and others. They laid hands on Naomi's head and prayed over her. Prayed for safe travel and good fortune. Prayed for her to find community and purpose. Prayed that she would carry their love with her, that she would remember she came from people who survived impossible things. When they finished, Naomi was crying. They were crying too. You'll write to us if you can, Ruth said. Let us know you're safe. I promise. The wagon was waiting in the yard, a merchant's wagon heading to Richmond with cotton and tobacco. The driver willing to take a passenger for a small fee. Reverend Crawford stood beside it, checking the arrangements one final time. Ready? He asked when Naomi approached. As I'll ever be. Jonathan came out of the manor carrying a small trunk. Your things, he said, and some extras I thought you might need. Warm coat, good boots, writing supplies. Naomi accepted them with a nod. No words seemed adequate. The driver helped her into the wagon. She settled among the bundles and crates, her few possessions beside her. From this vantage point she could see the whole plantation spread below the fields, where people still labored, the manor house gleaming white, the quarters where she'd slept every night of her life, until now. It looked smaller from up here, less permanent, like something that could fade into memory rather than hold her forever. Take care of yourself, Jonathan said, standing below. You too. The driver clicked his tongue. The horses leaned into their harness. The wagon began to roll. Naomi looked back once, saw the women waving from the kitchen door, saw Jonathan standing alone in the yard, his hand raised in farewell, saw Master Harrow at his study window, watching her leave the same way he'd watched everything else, as if it was simply another transaction. Another adjustment to his ledgers, then the wagon turned onto the road, and the plantation slipped from view behind the trees. Naomi faced forward. The road stretched ahead, dusty and uncertain. Reverend Crawford rode alongside on his old horse, keeping pace. "How are you feeling?" he called over. "Scared," Naomi admitted, "but free. That's a good combination. The scared will keep you careful. The free will keep you moving forward." They traveled through the morning, through country Naomi had never seen, despite living her whole life in these parts. The world was bigger than she'd imagined, fuller of possibility and danger. By afternoon, they reached the first stop, a church outside a small town where the pastor was expecting them. He greeted Reverend Crawford warmly, then turned to Naomi with kind eyes. "Welcome, sister. You're safe here. We'll feed you and let you rest before the next leg of your journey." That night, Naomi slept in a real bed in a small room behind the church. It was plain but clean, and it was hers for the night. No one could come take it from her. No one owned her time or her labor or her body. She lay awake long after the lamp was blown out, feeling the strangeness of it. Freedom was going to take some getting used to. The journey north took 2 weeks' slow progress by wagon and riverboat, stopping at churches and safe houses along the way. Each stop brought new faces, new kindnesses, people who'd never met her but offered help because Reverend Crawford vouched for her, because their faith demanded it, because they believed in a world where enslaved people should be free. Naomi met other travelers on similar journeys. Some were escaping, moving under cover of night, with forged papers and desperate hope. Others, like her, were traveling legally, but still cautiously, knowing that free papers didn't always protect black people from those who saw darkness of skin and assumed property. She kept her manumission documents close, slept with them under her pillow, showed them to anyone who questioned her presence. On the riverboat north from Richmond, a white woman asked what she was doing traveling alone. "I'm free, ma'am," Naomi said politely. "Traveling to Pennsylvania to find work." "Free." The woman's eyebrows rose. How did that happen? Naomi thought about lying, making up something simple, but then she thought about Jonathan's belated courage, about Miss Beatrice's testimony, about Dr. Green's stubborn insistence on truth. "I was accused of something I didn't do," she said. "Someone investigated properly, found the real cause, cleared my name, and then the man who'd held my papers freed me." The woman studied her. "And you're going north?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well," the woman nodded, "I hope you find what you're looking for." It was a small exchange, but it heartened Naomi. Not everyone was hostile. Not everyone assumed the worst. Some people, not enough, but some were willing to see her as human. The boat pushed north through green country, rivers and forests, small towns and farmland. The further they traveled, the more Naomi felt the weight lifting. She was putting miles between herself and the plantation, between herself and the life she'd been forced to live. By the time they reached Pennsylvania, she felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. The church in the Freetown was small, but welcoming, a wooden building with a bell tower and windows that let in good light. The pastor's name was William Thompson, a black man who'd bought his own freedom 20 years prior and now dedicated his life to helping others find theirs. Reverend Crawford rode ahead, Pastor Thompson said, shaking Naomi's hand. "Said you were a skilled cook, a woman of faith, and someone who'd been through trials." "That's accurate, sir." "Well, we're glad to have you. The church runs a kitchen. We feed people who need feeding. Could always use someone who knows their way around a stove." He smiled. "Paid work. Of course. You're free labor now. That means you get compensated fairly." Naomi's eyes stung. Paid work. Fair compensation. Words she'd never thought would apply to her. "I'd be grateful for the opportunity." Pastor Thompson showed her around the church, the kitchen in the basement, the small room upstairs where she could lodge until she found permanent housing. It was plain but clean, with a bed and a chair and a window overlooking the street. "It's not much," he said. "It's everything," Naomi replied. That first night in the Freetown, Naomi stood at her window watching people move through the streets below. Black people and white people, working together, living side by side. Not perfect, she could see the divisions, the suspicions, the lingering prejudices. but different, better than what she'd left behind. She unpacked her few belongings, hung her spare dress on a peg, set the wooden cross on the windowsill, placed her manumission papers in the drawer of the small table. Safe, but accessible. Then she knelt beside the bed and prayed. Not the desperate prayers of the cell, not the frantic pleas for deliverance, just simple gratitude for safe travel, for new beginnings, for the long, hard road that had led her here. When she finished praying, she opened the bundle Miss Beatrice had given her. The recipes were there, written in careful handwriting. Custard and cornbread, ham, glaze, and preserves. The food of her old life, the skills she'd learned in bondage, but they were hers now. She could choose what to make, when to make it, who to feed. The same recipes, but transformed by freedom into something new. Naomi smiled, folded the papers carefully, and tucked them away. Tomorrow she would start work in the church kitchen. She would cook again freely, carefully, joyfully. But tonight she would simply rest. Simply be. Simply exist as a free woman in a free town, with her whole life stretching ahead like an unwritten page. Winter came early that year. By December, snow had settled deep over Pennsylvania. Naomi had been in the free town for 3 months, working in the church kitchen, building a life one careful day at a time. She'd found a rhythm. Wake early, help prepare breakfast for those who needed it, migrants and travelers, people looking for work, families struggling through hard times. Cook through the day soups and stews, bread and simple desserts. Clean up in the evening, then return to her room to read or write letters by lamplight. It was hard work. Her hands were often chapped from washing dishes, her feet sore from standing. But it was her work, her choice, her life. She'd made friends other women in the congregation, people who welcomed her without asking too much about her past. She'd learned to navigate the town, to manage her small wages, to save a little each week toward a future she was still imagining. And she'd begun to heal. The terror of the accusation was fading, becoming a story she could tell without shaking. The betrayal of the forced marriage was softening into something she could examine without rage. The wounds weren't gone, but they were closing. One afternoon in late December, a letter arrived. Pastor Thompson brought it to the kitchen, looking curious. For you, from Virginia. Naomi's hands stilled on the bread dough. She wiped them on her apron, took the letter with trepidation. The handwriting was Miss Beatrice's. She waited until evening to read it, sitting in her room with a lamp burning low. Dear Naomi, I pray this letter finds you well and safe in your new life. We think of you often here, wondering how you're managing in the north. Ruth says to tell you she prays for you every night. Sarah sends her love. We all miss you, child, but we're glad you're free. I'm writing to tell you what's happened since you left. Master Harrow had to sell most of the plantation to pay the restitution claims. He kept only the manor house and a small parcel of land. Many of us were sold to other plantations nearby. We stayed together mostly, which is a mercy. Jonathan left, as he said he would. We heard he went to Tennessee, bought land there. He sends money sometimes for the families of those who died, trying to make amends, however he can. Don't know if he's succeeding, but he's trying. I want you to know something. When the county investigated, when they were asking questions about that terrible night, I told the full truth. Told them I'd overruled your concerns about the sugar. Told them you'd done everything right. I should have spoken up sooner, but I spoke up when it counted, and I'm at peace with that. Pastor Thompson wrote and said you're cooking in a church kitchen now. That makes me smile. You were always meant to cook freely, to feed people from your heart instead of from orders. I hope you're finding joy in it. Stay safe, child. Stay free. And remember you come from strong people. You carry all of us with you. With love. Miss Beatrice. Naomi read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with her manumission papers. Evidence of where she'd come from. Proof that she was remembered and loved. She pulled out paper and pen and began to write back. Told Miss Beatrice about the church kitchen, about the free town, about learning to live without fear. Told her about the snow and the people she'd met and the small, ordinary joys of choosing her own path. I'm well, she wrote. I'm safe. I'm free. And I'm learning that freedom is sweeter than I imagined, but harder to... It means making every choice myself, and sometimes I don't know what to choose, but I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm becoming someone new while still holding on to who I was. Thank you for speaking up when it mattered. Thank you for teaching me to cook and to survive and to keep faith, even when everything seemed lost. I'll carry you with me, too. She signed it, sealed it, took it to the post office the next morning. Spring came slow but certain. The snow melted. Green appeared on the trees. Naomi had been in the free town for 6 months now, and it was beginning to feel like home. She'd expanded her role at the church, not just cooking, but teaching others. Young women who wanted to learn. Children who needed basic skills. Anyone who came hungry for knowledge along with food. One afternoon, a woman came to the kitchen carrying a little girl maybe 4 years old, with wide eyes and a shy smile. I heard you teach cooking, the woman said. My daughter wants to learn. I can pay a little. No payment needed, Naomi said. Teaching is part of the work here. What's your name? Little one. Grace, the girl whispered. Naomi smiled. That's a beautiful name. Come here, Grace. Let me show you how to measure flour. She lifted the girl onto a stool, showed her how to cup her hands, how to pour carefully, how to feel when the dough was right. The mother watched with grateful eyes. As they worked, Naomi felt something shift in her chest. This was why she'd survived. This was what freedom meant, not just living for herself, but building something for others, teaching what she'd learned, passing on the skills and the strength. Over the following weeks, more people came. Gracie became a regular, showing up every Saturday with her mother, an older woman who'd lost her husband and wanted to learn to cook for herself. 2 sisters who dreamed of opening a small restaurant someday. Naomi taught them all, shared recipes and techniques, but also shared stories, carefully edited versions of her past that emphasized resilience and hope rather than trauma and pain. Where did you learn to cook like this? One of the sisters asked. From women who knew that feeding people was an act of love, Naomi said. From women who taught me that even in the hardest circumstances, you could create something good with your hands. She didn't mention the plantation, didn't mention bondage. Those details weren't necessary. What mattered was the principle that even in darkness, people created light, that even under oppression, people found ways to care for each other. That survival itself was a form of resistance. On a warm afternoon in late spring, Naomi sat on the church steps, watching children play in the street. She was taking a break from the kitchen, enjoying the sunshine and the sound of laughter. A man approached, travel-worn, dusty, from the road. He looked familiar, though it took her a moment to place him. Reverend Crawford. Reverend, she stood, surprised and delighted. What brings you north? My circuit, he said, smiling. I travel through here twice a year. Thought I'd stop and see how you're managing. They walked to a nearby park and sat on a bench under blooming trees. Naomi told him everything about the church kitchen, the teaching, the slow building of a new life. I'm proud of you, Reverend Crawford said. You've taken what was meant to break you and turned it into something beautiful. I had help. You, Pastor Thompson, Miss Beatrice, the elder women. We gave you opportunities. You did the work yourself. He paused. I have news from Virginia, if you want to hear it. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Master Harrow is ruined, lost almost everything, lives in the manor house alone, bitter and broken. The plantation is split up and sold. Many of the people who worked it are with new masters, some better, some worse. And Jonathan, last I heard he's in Missouri now, bought a small farm, works it himself, leaves simply, sends letters sometimes to the families of those who died. Though I don't know if they forgive him. Reverend Crawford looked at Naomi. He asks about you sometimes, wants to know if you're well. Tell him I am. Tell him I'm free and well and building a good life. Naomi thought for a moment. And tell him, I hope he finds peace with what happened. Hope he becomes the man he wanted to be. You've forgiven him? Then I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others, but I'm not carrying the weight of anger anymore. It was too heavy to bring north. They sat in companionable silence, watching the world go by. People of all kinds moving through their days, working, laughing, living. Not perfect, not without prejudice or pain, but free. You know what I think? Reverend Crawford said. I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Not because you survived what happened, though, that took strength too, but because you survived and still chose kindness, still chose to teach and feed and build instead of letting bitterness poison your future. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. I had good teachers, and now you're a good teacher yourself. He stood. I need to move on, got other stops to make, but I wanted to see you. Wanted to know you're thriving. I am. Thank you, Reverend, for everything. He tipped his hat and walked away. Naomi sat a while longer, thinking about the long road that had brought her here. The plantation and the kitchen, the forced marriage and the terrible accusations, the cell and the investigation, the journey north and the slow building of freedom. It hadn't been the story she would have chosen, but it had made her who she was, a woman who knew her own strength, who understood the value of truth, who chose to feed people and teach them and build community even after experiencing betrayal. She stood and walked back to the church. There was work to do, always work, but it was her work now, her choice, her life. And that, Naomi thought, as she tied on her apron and began measuring flour for the evening bread, that was everything. Years passed. Naomi stayed in the free town, became a fixture of the church community. Her cooking was known throughout the region, not fancy, but honest and good, made with care and skill. Her teaching helped dozens of people learn to feed themselves and their families. She never married. Some people asked why she was still young enough, still beautiful in a quiet way. But Naomi had learned something about herself during those years. She'd learned that she liked her independence, liked making her own choices without having to consider anyone else's desires or demands. Maybe someday she'd meet someone who understood that freedom and partnership could coexist, someone who saw her as an equal, who would never try to own or control. But she wasn't searching. She was content. On the 5th anniversary of her arrival in the Freetown, Pastor Thompson threw a small celebration. The church kitchen was full of people, friends and students, congregation members and neighbors. They'd all brought dishes to share, and the table groaned with food. 5 years ago, Pastor Thompson said, raising a cup, Naomi came to us carrying very little but her freedom papers and her faith. Today, she's an essential part of this community, a teacher, a friend, a woman who shows us daily what it means to transform pain into purpose. To Naomi? To Naomi? Everyone echoed. Naomi stood, her face warm with embarrassment and joy. Thank you, all. You gave me a home when I needed one. You gave me work and friendship and a place to belong. I came here broken and afraid. You helped me become whole. Little Gray's not so little anymore. Nearly 10 years old now. Ran up and hugged Naomi's waist. Will you teach me to make this special custard? She asked. The one with caramel? Naomi froze. She hadn't made that dessert since the terrible night at the plantation. Hadn't even considered it. The memory was too dark, too painful. But looking at Grace's eager face, she realized something. The dessert wasn't evil. The sugar had been contaminated, the circumstances tragic, but the recipe itself, the skill and care required to make it well, that was innocent. That was just food, just cooking. And she could reclaim it, could take it back from the darkness and make it something good again. Yes, Naomi said slowly. Yes, I'll teach you. We'll make it together, you and me, and we'll use good sugar stored properly. And we'll make something beautiful. Grace beamed. Around the room, people were eating and talking, laughing and sharing. The church kitchen, her kitchen, was full of life and warmth. Naomi looked around at all of it. This community she'd helped build. These people she'd fed and taught and loved. This life she'd created out of ashes. She thought about the plantation she'd left behind, about Master Harrow in his empty manor, about Jonathan working his Missouri farm, about Miss Beatrice and Ruth and Sarah still surviving, still strong. She thought about the cell and the accusations, about the terror and the betrayal, about the long road north and the slow learning of freedom. And she thought about this moment this evening of celebration. This room full of people who saw her as human, who valued her for who she was, rather than what they could take from her. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, "for deliverance, for bringing me through the fire, for teaching me that the ingredients that endure truth and care and love freely given those are the ones that make life worth living." Grace tugged her hand. "Can we start the custard lesson tomorrow?" Naomi smiled down at her. "Tomorrow, I promise." That night, alone in her room, Naomi pulled out her manumission papers one more time. She read through the legal language that had changed her life. Then she folded them carefully and placed them back in the drawer. She didn't need to read them anymore to remember what they meant. She lived that truth every day in the choices she made, the work she did, the life she built. She was free, and she was home.